Hello everyone, welcome back to Edubbey Global Solution. Today we'll be discussing inflation and deflation. That is the concept of inflation and the concept of what? The concept of deflation. In our first slide, we have the definition for both inflation and what? And deflation. Of course, inflation can be defined as the general rise in the level of price of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. And while our deflation is what? It's the general fall in the price level of goods and services in an economic over a period of time. That is vice versa of inflation. Moving to the next slide, we have the measurement of inflation and deflation. Now, what are the measurements for inflation and deflation, and how do we construct price index for consumer index? Now, to measure rises and falls in the price level, government construct what? Price indices or index by using what? Consumer price index. Now, how do we construct our price index? The first is to select year or base year, which is what? Which is usually 100. And the second one, identify the price of the commodity, that is the value given for you for the commodity, and also select the commodity itself. And now we now calculate the average change in price of the commodity over year, that is the average change in the price of the good and services. Now we have one past question here: what is included in the construction of the consumer price index? I know that you can easily get this because it is right beside you here. What is included? We have price elasticity of demand, we have incomes, we have a base year, we have the quantity, supply. Of course, the base year is included in the consumer price index. Now we move to the next slide. We now have the illustrated for price index. Here we have the commodity which have been selected. We have the price in base year, that is which is represented as what? PO. And we also have the prices in the current year, and it is also known as P1. Now the formula for price index is now what? Our P1, that is the current year, divided by the PO, which is the base year, multiplied by 100. That will give you your consumer price index for a given period of time. Now we move to the next slide. Move to the next slide, we will have one past question here related to consumer prices index. The table shows the consumer prices index, that is CPI, of the country for 5 years. Which statement about the country is correct? Now we have it faced deflation in year 2. Let us check. Does this CPI reduce or increase? Of course, it's increase. That's the general. That is an increase in the general price level. That should be inflation. So option 1 is out of it. Option 2 said it faced deflation in year 3. Let us check. From year 2, we have 120 to 135. That is the persistent rise. Also, we have inflation. So option 2 is also out of it. It faced inflation in year 5. Inflation in year 5, let us check. From year 4 to year 5, we have a decrease. Of course, that's the third option is also out of it. We have it faced inflation in year 4. From year 3 to year 4, we have increase. Of course, that should be our answer because there is a persistence rise from year 3 to year 4. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have we have the causes of inflation. What are the causes of inflation? Of course, economics divided the causes into 2 main categories, which are what? Let us drag this into the correct answer. We have a rise in the price level, that is inflation, caused by an increase in the cost of production in an economy. Of course, the cost of production could rise due to higher wages, higher indirect taxes, or higher cost of raw materials. And of course, the main categories of this inflation is known as cost push inflation. Now we have an inflation caused by an increase in aggregate demand, that is exceeding aggregate supply. Of course, that should be what the second one, that is demand pull inflation. Now let us check. We are good to go. We move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have the consequences of what? Of inflation. We have the consequences of inflation. We have multiple choice here. We have, it comes down to the country's balance of payment position, that is the import and export of a country, of course, and inflation can also result to harm the country balance of payment. We have discourage of production here. Of course, inflation cannot discourage production. We cannot choose one. We have fixed income group, lender and saver, that will lose. Of course, a person who has a fixed income will lose, as he cannot press for higher wages during the time of what? The time for inflation. And it can also lead to what? It can also lead to uncertainty. And we also have lower purchasing power. Of course, when the price level rises, the lesser number of goods and services you can buy with the same amount of money. It also leads to lower purchasing power. Of course, let us check. We are good to go. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have the policies to control inflation. Of course, do remember our policies that we have treated in our previous classes. Here we have the contractionary monetary policy that involves increasing what? Increasing our interest rate, that will reduce demand. And we also have contractionary fiscal policy that will also reduce demand. That is increasing our what? Increasing our taxes. Now we have supply side policy, short as privatization and deregulation. And we also have the exchange rate policy. Now we move to the next slide. We have one past question here. A country wishes to reduce the level of inflation. Which combination of policy measure would be the most successful? We have the policy measure 1 and the policy measure 2. We have the policy measure 1 and policy measure. As we said earlier, that we have the policy that is used to reduce what? Inflation. We have the contractionary, monetary and fiscal policy among them. Now let us check these options out. We have decrease in interest rate. Of course, that should not be the answer, because contractionary is dealing with increase in interest rate or taxes. Now here we have increased government spending, increase interest rate, decrease exchange rate. Of course, this should be our answer. For policy measure 1, we have to increase our interest rate, that is the contractionary monetary policy, to reduce what? To reduce the level of inflation. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have the causes of deflation. What do we think can cause the persistence for in an economic? Now we have a rise in the labor productivity. Of course, a rise in labor productivity can cause deflation, and at the same time we also have a fall in demand in an economic. Of course, a fall in demand in an economy can also lead to a deflation. It can also lead to deflation when the demand fall, because during recession, a fall in demand in an economy cause the general price to fall, and we automatically result to deflation. When supply equals to demand, of course, when supply equals to demand, we cannot have deflation. And we have aggregate supply exceeding aggregate demand. Of course, when supply exceeds demand, there's an excess of output in the economy not consumed, which cause prices to fall. We also have technological advance. Of course, the technological advance has reduced cost of production can also pull down the cost push inflation. That will also cause deflation. And a fall in the what? A fall in the productivity. Of course, a fall in the productivity cannot lead to deflation. Let us check. We are good. Wow. Now let us move to the next slide. Move to the next slide. We now have the consequences of deflation. What can be the effect of deflation? Now, lower prices will discourage production, resulting in unemployment. Of course, yes, lower prices can only favor what? Can only favor the consumer. Tax revenue of the government will also fall, yes, and borrower will lose during inflation period. Of course, during the deflation, because now the value of debt they hold is higher than when they borrow the money. And we have the deflation will also increase the real debt burden of the government. Of course, that is true, and it also leads to what? It also cause recession. That is when demand and price continue to fall, the firm are forced to close down, and enough profit are not being made. Here we have one past question here. What is likely to happen when the country is experiencing deflation? Of course, I said this, if you check out these options, consumer will delay spending, the level of imports increases, the real value of money falls, government raises interest rate. Of course, the consumer will delay their spending. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have the policies to control deflation. I want you guys to guess here where you have to choose the multiple choice. We have discussed about the policies that can be used to control inflation. Now, what do you think can be the policies to control deflation here? Policies to control deflation here, of course, where we have contractionary fiscal policy. Of course, that should not be the to correct deflation. We have said that earlier, that in inflation we have the contractionary fiscal policy and contractionary monetary policy. Here now we will now have the expansionary monetary policy, that is decrease the interest rate, and expansionary fiscal policy, decrease in taxes. We also have change in inflation expectation. Of course, when the deflation is expected, businesses won't increase wages and consumer won't pay higher prices. Now we also have devaluation. Of course, devaluing in currency through selling domestic currency or increasing the money supply will also cause export price to fall. Now let us check here if we got it right. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we have past question here related to inflation. In a country, inflation is 10% and nominal interest rate is what? Is 7%. Which group is most likely to benefit from this situation? That is, the nominal interest is decreased to inflation. Of course, the borrower should be the most benefit in this situation. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we also have past question here. It's also about inflation. A country has rapidly increasing inflation. What's an example of monetary policy measure to reduce the problem? Remember, we have monetary policy to be what? Of course, it is dealing with interest rate. Now here we have the options to be subsidizing key industry, increasing income tax, introducing minimum price for some products, increasing interest rate. Of course, monetary policy is dealing with increasing interest rate. That is the monetary policy to reduce what? To reduce the inflation. We move to the next slide. We now have the question related to deflation. What may cause deflation? What do you think can cause the general fall in the price level of goods and services? Government using a policy of very low interest rate, is that so? Increase in the rate of inflation as measured by the consumer price index, advances in technology and increases in labor productivity, increases in the cost of production that reduce firm cost. Of course, advances in technology and increase in labor productivity cost can be the causes of deflation. This will be the end of the class. Stay tuned to our website www.edubbey.com. See you in the next class.